Do you ever yell at your staff?
Sometimes, but not in any aggressive fashion.
A lot of them say they felt intimidated by you.
Well, people tell me that sometimes because I'm very direct. I think that's probably a German trait.
Before I came here to speak with you guys, I was having second thoughts because I knew the extent of his power.
I think the New Zealanders should know their true colors.
I feel scared for my family, especially now that I'm coming out and then having this interview. But for me, the best thing is for New Zealand to know who Mr. Dotcom is.
They have no money, no political clout, and they have a lot to lose. But these former employees of Kim.com have decided to speak out about how they say they were treated and what Kim.com really thinks of Kiwis.
Well, he's always called them cheap-ass farmers.
So that's his description of New Zealanders, cheap-ass farmers.
Yes.
In your opinion, what do you think he thinks of Prime Minister John Key?
He hates him. Yeah, he hates him.
So just who are these workers? Well, first up is Fil Orduna, a Manila native and Kim.com's private butler. He claims he's owed $75,000. Ruth Lairday, the butler of Kim's wife, Mona, she's claiming $92,000. And John Tactaquin, a personal assistant, who claims he's owed more than $200,000. Out of anyone, John knows Kim.com best. He was friends with Kim's first wife, Lovely, and knew the family for years before being hired. If you had to kind of tell New Zealanders what type of person Mr. Dotcom is, given that you know him that well, what would you say?
To be quite honest, Mr. Dotcom is actually very helpful with people he just met, and when he knows they're in need, he's always willing to help.
So he's a generous man?
Yes, he's a very generous man.
But his staff say there is a dark side to the flamboyant millionaire. Does he have an explosive temper?
He does, which is very scary.
Did he ever used to yell at you?
Yes.
While the staff say he could be bad-tempered, they also add, for the most part, they loved working for the Dotcoms and thought they were a family. But all that changed after the controversial raids on the Dotcom mansion.
Ground units gates are open.
In January 2012, the police arrested Kim.com after US charges relating to alleged copyright infringement. His assets were frozen, the extravagant lifestyle ground to a halt.
Confirm located target, safe room, 3rd level.
The staff were initially not paid for 2 months. Many of his Kiwi staff members left and later settled with the Dotcoms. But many Filipino staff who had been with the family for years were told they would have to take substantial pay cuts. And you accepted that?
Yes, we did, because for us, for me especially, during that time, I knew it was very difficult for them. Mr. Dotcom went to jail, and Mona was, pregnant with twins.
Kim.com was released from prison 4 weeks later. His staff say he was humbled they had remained loyal.
He called a meeting for all the stuff that remained there. He told us rather, that thank you for staying, and then you know guys that I'm innocent. We'll fight this, and then just stick with me. Things will get better.
Kim.com came out of prison in fighting form.
The war for the internet has begun. Hollywood is in control of politics. The government is killing innovation. Don't let them get away with that.
He vowed to rebuild his internet empire, but in the meantime his staff had to pay the price. Phil says his weekly pay went down by $275, and both John and Ruth say theirs dropped by 175. While they were promised substantial bonuses if they stayed on for another 2 years, the staff say they were doing a lot more for their money.
So how many hours were you working a day?
Minimum 16 hours. But
A minimum of 16 hours?
Minimum 6 hours. But there was one time that I was working 2 days straight.
No sleep?
I do had some sleep, some nap, but I always had to attend to him. And that's the time when he usually plays.
Plays video games?
Yeah.
So, that feels good.
Did you just think at the time that it was just an expected part of your job?
Yeah. For us Filipinos, it's like that. We're hardworking people, you know. Even though if the situation is really tough, we still work our ass off. Yeah, that's how we are.
The trio claim they were working around 90 hours a week, which means they were only earning around $5 an hour, well below New Zealand's minimum wage. They also say they rarely, if ever, got a day off.
Did you understand that while working at the Dotcom mansion, that New Zealand employment law applied to you?
Honestly, no. Because we think that the rules in the mansion, it's the rule for New Zealand. You know what I mean? Like, this is Kim.com rule, this is Mona.com rules, and we have to obey that.
So the staff allege they were now working incredibly long hours at a reduced wage, something they say they accepted until money started to flow back into the household. Remember, Kim.com's assets have been frozen by the US government after the raid on Megaupload's assets, but he launched a new business called Mega.
I have a dream, like Dr. King, this is the time to stand up and fight.
The staff say inside the mansion, the lavish lifestyle was back.
Yeah, they were spending. And then a lot of parties.
How hard was it for all the staff who weren't getting paid at their full rate to witness?
It's really heartbroken. So that's what we felt, you know. We felt like they don't care about us anymore.
There is no doubt Kim.com is known for his incredibly lavish lifestyle. He's estimated to be worth several $100 million, and he likes to spend it on parties and fast cars. But for his Filipino staff, seeing the family continue to spend money after the raid was hard to stomach. They had been forced to take pay cuts after Dotcom's assets were frozen. They claim they worked a minimum of 16 hours a day, which meant they only earned around $5 an hour.
Did you know at the time that under New Zealand law that you had the same rights as New Zealand workers?
No, we did not.
The staff's dissatisfaction all came to a head at a meeting at the Dotcom mansion. Remember, the staff say the Dotcoms had promised them they would be reimbursed for the pay cuts they took when his assets were frozen. But in that meeting, the goalposts were changed.
So he owed me $21,000 to $23,000. I was only paid $6,000, almost 7,000 New Zealand dollars.
And the reason for that? The rest, $14,000, John was told, was for the tax department.
Do you accept, though, that all New Zealanders and all people working in New Zealand do have to pay tax?
Yes, I know. I know that everybody has to pay tax, but we were given the knowledge that they were shoulder the tax.
That was what you had always thought?
Yes.
What was the atmosphere like in that meeting?
Well, during that meeting, I think, well, I can honestly say that we were all shocked, like we were all speechless. because it came as a surprise. There was no warning.
Ruth, Mona Dotcom's butler, resigned and went home to the Philippines. Fil Orduna, Kim Dotcom's butler, applied for another job, but says when his boss accused him of breaching confidentiality, he was told to return to the Philippines.
So you were fired?
Yes. Just like that. I was fired.
And as for John, the personal assistant, well, he says he decided to question Kim Dotcom over the tax issue.
And I told him that I was very disappointed. That's when Mr. Dotcom blew up on me. He said that how could I be so ungrateful, that how could I be so selfish, you know, that if it weren't for him, I would be like a nobody, I would be nothing.
A few days later, John was scheduled to return to the Philippines for a vacation. He says he was told not to come back to New Zealand by Kim's wife, Mona.
So I was like, I asked Mona, like, how did Kim came to that decision? What did I do? Did I say something wrong? Was it because of the meeting? And then Mona said, yeah, Kim didn't like that you talked back.
So you believe you were fired because you questioned Mr. Dotcom?
Yes.
Did you have any written warnings?
No, there was no warning at all.
So JR, what's life been like for you since you got back to the Philippines?
Well, it has been really difficult, especially looking for a job.
And that all comes down to your employment certificate. Can you explain to New Zealanders, you know, what that is?
An employment certificate is a document that companies required so you can explain where you previously worked.
And Mr. Dotcom hasn't signed that, has he?
Yes, unfortunately, he doesn't want to.
Without that employment certificate, it's almost impossible to find a job in the Philippines. Kim Dotcom's former butler, Phil, and his wife are facing having their house repossessed.
All we ever hope for is just to get the settlement done, for me to move forward and to pay my debts, because if I lost this house, where will I live? Where would my family live?
On Monday, the Filipino workers filed a legal case against Kim Dotcom. Their lawyer, Paul Dale.
Obviously, you've tried to settle out of court.
Yes, we've engaged in negotiations, as have they. We've explored the issues, and to be honest, I expected we would be able to agree, but it turns out we haven't.
What is your view about Mr. Dotcom's position that he would always pay his staff when he could?
Well, to be honest, I don't really understand how he's apparently supporting a political party but unable to pay, if that is the case, unable to pay the employees. I don't know anything about his circumstances, but he doesn't seem to go without, whereas these employees are going without.
Kim Dotcom has now donated $3.5 million to the Internet Party. His former workers say if he has that type of money, he should have settled with them.
How can he take care of New Zealand when he can take care of his staff? It's simple. It's just simple as that.
So Mr. Dotcom backs a political party which says it stands for workers' rights, yet in his own house he had staff who were working many, many hours.
Yes.
Unpaid.
Yes.
Why fight for freedom, for the rights of other people, when you have staff around you suffering, not getting paid correctly, working, overworked? Why not fight for us first, then fight for other people? We've been loyal to him through thick and thin. We understood him. You know, we were willing to help them sincerely, you know, from the heart. But I felt like after all that we've done, it was just thrown at our faces. When I first heard that he was planning to get into politics, I was kind of like, I was shocked. And at the same time, I was laughing, to be honest, because I remembered how he used to call Kiwis. He would call them cheap-ass farmers. And Mona also, you know, like Kiwis are very cheap, they have no fashion sense, something like that. They would always say, before when they had a lot of money, they always had like nasty things to say about Kiwis.
So you don't think he cares about the future of New Zealand or New Zealanders?
To be quite honest, I don't think so. If he's doing this, if he wants to get into Parliament, it's for himself, it's for his own good. It won't be about for the benefit of Kiwis, for New Zealanders. It won't be about that.
Would you describe yourself as a good employer?
Yes.
Are you kind to your staff?
Yes.
And in fact, many of your staff have talked about your generosity.
Yes.
However, everyone we have spoken to has talked about your temper. Do you think you have an anger issue?
No.
Do you ever yell at your staff?
Sometimes, but not in any aggressive fashion.
Yet a lot of them say they felt intimidated by you.
Well, people tell me that sometimes because I'm very direct. I think that's probably a German trait.
So you don't think that your behaviour was bullying?
No.
Do you think it's acceptable to yell at your staff?
Well, it is acceptable, and I only do it when there are serious mistakes. I'm like a family father, okay? So if your child does something stupid, and I'm just using this as an explanation, right? You do say something about that, and sometimes you do get loud because you don't want that mistake to happen again. I'm looking after them, I care for them, they are family to me, I love them.
But a lot of your staff say it was almost like you were lovely 1 minute and the next minute in a full-blown rage.
Well, it's completely wrong, completely unacceptable. Such an allegation, it's not true.
Do you accept that your Filipino staff worked many, many long hours here at the mansion?
Yes, I accept that. You know, sometimes they will have to do a task for 2 or 3 hours and then they are off for a couple of hours. So it's never like they're working 16 or 18 hours in one go. That's definitely not the case.
And they absolutely say that was the case before the raids. But they say after the raids happened and you lost many staff, that they weren't just carrying out their initial jobs, they were doing many other jobs and they were working 16 hours to up to 22 hours in a day.
Absolutely not. That is not correct. Okay, there isn't even that kind of work here that someone would have to work 16, 18 or 22 hours. That is insane. And let me just explain this to you. You know, after the raid happened, we had absolutely nothing. All the assets were frozen. And I simply hadn't the capability to pay them what I paid them before. And I gave everyone an option. I said, you can either stay here and work here, but I need to cut your pay in half and defer the rest until I'm able to pay you, or you can leave.
They all said they were happy to accept a pay cut. They understood your position.
Yeah.
But they said there was a staff meeting called to discuss them being repaid that amount. Mm-hmm. You recall that staff meeting?
Yes.
And what did you tell them in that staff meeting?
We talked about the tax, for example. In New Zealand, as you know, the employer pays the tax. So I just had to explain to them this new reality that, you know, we have to pay PAYE. And that's why, you know, there will be a slight adjustment again. So they went up and then they were disappointed that a tax was deducted.
Wasn't it their feeling, though, that you were shouldering the tax burden? That was their understanding.
Yeah, but that was a disagreement. The difference was that in Hong Kong, they didn't have to pay tax, or it wasn't the obligation of the employer. In New Zealand, it's a different legal situation, and I explained that to them. And of course, they were unhappy when they learned that, wow, all of a sudden we have to pay 25% tax. And they expected me to pay that tax. And I think anyone can agree that that is unreasonable.
But in actual fact, you took a lot more off them than 20%. It was well and truly over 30.
Yes, because they are living with us. So we are paying for the food. They had lunch, breakfast, dinner.
So you thought that you could put an extra tax in for that?
Well, it's called lodging. It's a very common thing.
That wasn't in that contract,
because,
Dotcom.
No, it was an agreement that we made, and we made a new agreement to which they agreed.
But to get specific, John in particular talks about how he questioned you after that meeting on the tax issue, and he was then fired for questioning you.
Okay, that is completely wrong. That is outrageous for him to say that. He resigned. It had nothing to do with the discussion about the tax.
He claims that your former wife, or wife Mona, texted him and told him not to come back from the Philippines, that you were angry with him for questioning him, and that was it.
That is wrong, and I think you should talk with Mona about that. Ask her for an interview. Like I said, both JR, John, and Ruth were Mona's staff. I didn't even have any interaction with them at all.
Then let's talk about your own staff, in particular Phil, your personal butler.
Yeah.
He claims...
Who I miss very much, by the way. He has been really helpful, and he's been a great guy.
He claims he was also told not to come back after you accused him of breaching confidentiality.
Yes, and that is correct. He has breached his confidentiality agreement with me. He went to one of my investors in my mega business and revealed to him private information about my family.
He maintains he did not do that. He was just seeking another job.
Yeah, well, that's dishonest.
Did you give anyone written warnings?
I don't think so, no.
Yet under New Zealand law, that is what is required of employers.
Yeah, I understand that. And, you know, I think I could have done things better. I just didn't understand what the requirements were. You know, I always lived abroad. I always lived in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, you can basically, you know, have a very simple employment law. I agree that I could have done these things better.
It seems that there are a lot of disagreements in this circumstance. They say they were fired. You say they resigned. You say they got this amount. They say they didn't. Can this be settled, Mr. Dotcom?
Yes, and I've made a generous settlement offer. They have asked for things that were just not possible to do. For example, they wanted me to give them a certificate of great employment, you know, that they can use me as a reference. But I don't accept that because they have made outrageous demands through their lawyers for payment that I think is completely unjustified. So I wouldn't give them a reference. And
it is not a reference. They were asking you to sign their employment certificate, which you know, Mr. Dotcom, is incredibly important in the Philippines. Without it, you can't get a job.
And I'm sorry to say that, but you have your facts wrong. Okay, they asked for a reference. They asked that they can go to future employers and tell them that they work for me,
well, surely
and that they can
you can at least write that.
Excuse me?
Surely you can at least write that. You don't have to say.
Well, would you write that about somebody who has...
Well, you could say, it's just the truth. They work for you.
Let me ask you a question. Would you write that about somebody who has breached their confidentiality agreements with you, who has made outrageous demands for money? Would you give someone like that a reference?
It doesn't have to be a good reference, Mr. Dotcom. It just has
So
to
you
be
would give,
a reference.
You would give someone who does that
I would
to
say
you,
that someone worked for me and that they could call me and ask me what.
Well, you know, I have different principles, okay? Let me ask you something. You sent a team to the Philippines to talk with them, right?
Mm-hmm. I went to the Philippines.
When did you do that?
I went on Friday.
You went on Friday. You know when they filed?
My understanding was that it was Friday.
Yeah. So, I mean, isn't that an incredible timing? You are there on the same day they file this? Wow.
I'm fast, Mr. Dotcom.
Yeah.
Can we just then talk a little bit about the way you see New Zealanders? One of the things that your staff said is that you refer to New Zealanders as cheap-ass farmers.
It's absolutely wrong.
You've never called us that?
Absolutely not.
So what do you think of New Zealanders then?
I love New Zealanders. Are you kidding? I'm never saying things like that, okay? That is outrageous. Again, it's something that is designed to hurt me, and I don't even know where this hatred is coming from. You know, I've done nothing to deserve this. I've never said that. I can categorically tell you that that is wrong.
Again, to all your staff who we've talked to who've said that you do bully, that you do intimidate, that you do yell and scream at them, What do you say, Mr. Dotcom?
Absolutely wrong. I mean, I'm listening to all this stuff that you're throwing at me here, and this is how I react to things like this.
Yes, but you're also surrounded by television cameras,
yeah,
Mr.
but this
Dotcom.
is who I
doubt
am.
that you would lose your temper right now.
This is who I am. See, this is my character, right? I am against confrontation. I love harmony. I avoid conflict, okay? I'm not the kind of guy who is bipolar or throws tantrums or anything like that. You know, I'm a very friendly guy to my staff. You know, I'm joking around with them. We're having fun. I'm a nice guy. You know, we're all on a first name basis. They call me sir, but you know, I call them by their first names, and we are all always friendly. We used to always joke around. There was a lot of laughter in the house. Unfortunately, all of that was drained with the raid.
They did talk
changed.
about how you changed.
Yeah. It made me very bitter. The raid itself was a very traumatic event for this family. Very traumatic. I mean, it took a long time to get over that. And it changed me. It made me bitter. It made me angry, okay? And some of that might have reflected to the staff. They might have sensed that. And I understand that, okay?